Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us at the Hallelujah Diet webinar. This is Paul Malcolm, President and CEO of Hallelujah Acres and Hallelujah Diet, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us this evening. We have a great presentation in store for you with Dr. Starkey, and we can't wait to introduce him. But before we do that, we'd like to just cover a couple of housekeeping things. First off, if at any time through the presentation you have any questions, please, on the left-hand side of your panel, just put your question in the text box there, and we will queue them up. And toward the end of the presentation, we'll be doing a question and answer with Dr. Starkey, and he will answer as many questions as we have time for. But we do appreciate your participation through that. Additionally, we'll be giving away three-month supply of the trace mineral supplement the Hallelujah Diet produces. And we'll be doing that during the Q&A section. So hang with us to the end, and we'll be doing that drawing there for three-month supply of the Hallelujah Diet Trace Minerals. And before we get started, I want to introduce Dr. Starkey. We would love to go ahead and just have a word of prayer and ask the Lord to bless our time together. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this time this evening to be able to present this information. We pray that you'll give Dr. Starkey the words and the insights to share, Lord, and that we as the audience, we have the ears to hear. We know there's great information here that will help us to live a healthier life, and we pray that we're able to absorb that and apply it into our lives. Thank you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. As we introduced Dr. Starkey this morning, this evening, he's a board-certified naturopathic physician, and he has worked for Trace Minerals Research since 1991. His expertise is in the field of trace minerals, and Anne, many of you know Anne, and she's worked with Dr. Starkey several times and talked with him, and he's provided great insights into some issues that we've talked with and over time. So his focus and training is on building blocks for a healthy diet and the role that trace minerals play in your health. And it's really our privilege this evening to welcome Dr. Starkey, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Paul, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to spend the time with you.
Well, we look forward to hearing your presentation and what you have to share, and you have such great knowledge. Thank you for taking this time with us this evening.
No, it's my pleasure, and I hope that for those that are on with us tonight, I hope that they walk away from it with just a little more information to help support and protect themselves.
And through our conversations, Dr. Starkey, you've really shared some insights how this has worked for you in your personal life and how trace minerals have worked for you in your personal life. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I know our audience would too.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to share some thoughts with us. I think the first thing I'd love to do is oftentimes when we talk about trace minerals, I know that most of society today, we get hung up on these different macro minerals or micro minerals, and if we really stop to think about it, 96% of our body is made up of 4 elements: oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. And yet at the same time, the other remaining 4% is often referred to as trace minerals. And I just want to point out the fact that these trace minerals are so minute in the body that they make up less than 0.01% of body weight. So that's why they're referred to as trace and not, I think they're so incredibly vitally important because of what we're up against today. I think there was a Nobel Peace Prize winner by the name of Alexis Carrel back in 1912, and I love one of the statements that he made. He said, "Soil is the basis of all human life and our only hope for a healthy world. All of life will either be healthy or unhealthy according to the fertility of the soil." Now, that was 104 years ago, and when you really stop to think about it, where have we come from since then? And I think that soil building is not one of our highest priorities today in our society. In fact, back in 1936, there was a doctor by the name of Dr. Charles Northern that presented his case in Congress, and he estimated that 99% of the American population back then were deficient in these trace minerals due to agricultural farming technique. That was 81 years ago, and yet there was an Earth Summit report given back in 1992, and we were at that point 85% depleted in our soils. Yet at the same time, if you really stop to think about what we've done to ourselves since that time frame, we've industrialized, we've commercialized, we of course pasteurize, sanitize, and we basically process everything we eat and drink today as a society. And I bring up the word stress, by the way. I think that stress is the most overlooked, undiagnosed health condition that we face today as a society that rob ourselves of our minerals. And remember, anything that robs the body of a mineral is called a dysfunction or dis-ease. And then I have to pose the question, we look at the way that we're designed by our Creator. We were designed to pick it, pluck it, dig it, fish it, and kill it, and drink lots of water. Now, I know the last one, of course, killing. What I mean by that is whether it be fish, poultry, or meat in general. But that's how we were designed. But today, when I say poor diet here, I have to respond this way. If you think about it, most of society, unless they're in a crisis situation, we cook it, nuke it, eat it out of a can, a box, a pickup window, or a concession stand, and we drink very little water. And by the way, I think sometimes what we should be doing when we start looking at these different processed foods or refined foods or these beverages, I think we have to fall back to the fact that, remember, 90% of your blood is water. 85% of your brain, 75% of your tissue, and 30% of your skeletal is water. So when we really stop to think about the way our bodies are designed, water should be our number one supplement. And yet today, because of all the beverages available, I would say that dehydration and mineral deficiency is the breeding ground for inflammation today. And I know that that's a bold statement, but I think that once we start looking at what we're doing to our soils, because here's a common sense thought. If these minerals are not found in the soil, they're not in our food. If they're not in our food, they're not in our body. If they're not in our body, we call that in a doctor's office today deficiency. And if not resolved, we call that dysfunction or dis-ease to our system. So remember, I think that when we start focusing on soil building as a part of our human building and well-being, we wouldn't have to be having this conversation tonight. And yet, looking back as to our industrialization today, the pollution that it's causing, I think that just by walking out of our homes today, we have to remember that these dysfunction or deficiencies, I think, are caused by the very air that we're breathing today, because we definitely have to throw the word healed out of our vocabulary. Because remember, every time we breathe in our society today, our body's having to adjust for some type of pollution or chemical that is causing our minerals to be used and oftentimes, I believe, overused. And remember, if we're not putting these minerals back in, our bodies cannot synthesize minerals. They have to be given. So in other words, if we're not supplying that demand, our bodies have to rob the cells, the tissues, the organs, and eventually the bone. And I think that that's where synthetic fertilizers literally stop the uptake, even if these minerals are in the soil, that over-farming and fertilization, I think, are hampering the very aspect of what we're trying to focus on our foods today. Yet, at the same time, we have to remember where all these minerals are going. I think that that's where, as we start, if we stop for just a minute and think about it as to where these minerals are found, we know that, of course, when it comes to nature in general, nature always provides what our needs should be if we look in the proper places. So one thing that I would love to do is to note that, I don't know how many of us have been to Utah, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later, but this concept of runoff into these Great Lakes coming from, of course, evaporation, wind, rain, and the whole cycle continues. And remember, these bodies of waters that are around us are absolutely loaded with these minerals that are absolutely essential for our health today. And yet, when we really stop to think about it, again, we are nothing more than minerals. Hydration and mineralization make up the entire universe, and yet at the same time, these minerals that are found within our bodies literally conduct every aspect of our, they keep us alive. Our bodies are nothing more than hydration and minerals. And if we're not supplying them, and I think that the thing that oftentimes concerns me is most individuals think that just by taking a multivitamin, I think we have to pull away for a moment, away from a multivitamin, because they honestly do not offer all that we need. And when we look at these different makeups of these multivitamins out there, the reason why I bring up multivitamin, by the way, that is the number one selling supplement in the nation and has been for years. And yet, I think that we should go back and rename some of these products as not vitamins, but minerals are the key part of reestablishing our health. Because without those minerals, our bodies do not function. I love to oftentimes point out the fact that, the very definition of death is not when our heart stops beating, but when all the electrical impulse in our brain stop. So in other words, we're nothing but a very sophisticated machine running up electrical impulses. Well, these natural impulses, that electrical conductivity, that frequency comes from your minerals, and more importantly, these trace minerals. And if these minerals are not in the form in which our bodies need, oftentimes I think that most of our society today, I find it very concerning as to the amount of constipation that we're faced with as a society. So in other words, that concept of we are what we eat, I think we have to go back to the drawing board. It's not what we're eating, it's what we're capable of absorbing. So that's why we bring up the fact that an ion is an atom or a group of atoms that carry a positive and negative charge. I think that that's so important here because remember, I believe the greatest, for those that like symphony music, I think our bodies are applicable to this in the fact that I believe the greatest symphony ever to be orchestrated is within us. And if we remove that conductor out in front of that symphony at any point during the concert, eventually you're going to be able to hear that noise, chaos, confusion. These ions are that natural conductor to that internal symphony because I truly believe that, again, the greatest symphony ever to be orchestrated or assembled is within us. And when we really stop to think about the significance of that internal symphony, we have to go back and think about just a couple of things I think are awe-inspiring, is that we are each responsible for 10 trillion masterful musicians, 10 trillion with a T. And yet at the same time, it's amazing to me that we even survive our college days, much less what we're doing to ourselves today. But at the same time, those that natural conductor to that internal symphony. And by the way, if I could for a moment, if you stop and think about this, there are more components inside of one human cell than there are stars in the galaxy that you can see with your eyes. To me, that is absolutely amazing to think about what we're designed, because ultimately I think we all understand that we are our greatest physician. We are our personal intuition, if we pay very close attention, will lead us down to that optimal or that critical, that when I say critical to optimal health, I think that by putting this emphasis back into these trace minerals, and we put that internal symphony back on the proper sheet of music, we should be able to take our breath away. And to me, that's exactly where we if we focus on the these trace first. Now, mind you, vitamins, macrominerals, enzymes, amino acids, proteins are all vital for our health. But when it comes right down to it, that current, that electrical impulse, without those minerals to conduct that electrical impulse, those vitamins, macrominerals, enzymes, amino acids, and proteins are basically useless to us. So when we talked about ions, they conduct electrical impulse throughout the entire body. I don't care what type of health concerns that you're dealing with today. These minerals are designed by nature to put us back on that balanced path. And again, it doesn't come down, even though most of our minerals are absorbed in the small intestines. Remember, these ionic trace minerals do not have to go through a digestive process. They can be absorbed right in the mouth. Or, better yet, I not only like to take it from an internal standpoint, but I love to put it on topical as well. Because if you really stop to think about it, the largest organ of the body is our skin. And if we can put these minerals on point specific, I believe that not only can we heal from the outside in, but we could, of course, also from the inside out. And yet, at the same time, I think that one of the things that is important to understand is that we can improve our diets by taking out sugar. I think is a huge culprit to a lot of our health concerns today. But whole foods to me is, again, if you're growing your own food or you're supporting a local grower that you trust, I think we're on the right page there. Now, organic to me is the cleanest food available. No pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, or fungicides. But when it really comes down to it, I believe that by our knowledge and our supplementation, by putting these trace minerals back in places like eating that raw organic diet from a mineral standpoint that we personally control consistently every single day. And I think that is the most important aspect of us gaining the knowledge to be able to put that foundation back in place so that until we catch up with nature again or balance, allowing nature to balance our soils again, that's where these trace minerals, I believe, come in to be able to enhance the foods in which we're consuming on a daily basis. Yet, at the same time, people always ask, there's a marvelous body of water that there's two bodies of water in the world that are typically compared to. That's the Dead Sea and the Great Salt Lake out of Utah. Now, the Dead Sea, they state, is bottomless. All that means to me is that it is extremely deep. Yet at the same time, the Great Salt Lake, and the reason why I bring this up is that it's 8 to 10 times the concentration of seawater or ocean water. And yet at the same time, I love that concept that this product is not manufactured. It's harvested. And yet science can't duplicate it. Man can't manufacture. I love to state that. It puts that balance back in nature's hands. And when we put it into our bodies, I hope that we're paying very, very close attention to our own individual needs, because in doing so, we have the ability to play the type of music we were designed to play, and it should take our breath away. Now, at the same time, we're the only ones doing what we do on the northern shore of the Great Salt Lake. And yet at the same time, like I said earlier, we harvest it. We do not manufacture it. But the whole point to a lot of this information, I want to quickly get to that pH balance concept. You know, there are a lot of individuals out there trying to promote or push their saliva or urine to 9.0. But remember this, pH stands for potential hydrogen. And yet what I'd like to do is simplify it. I'd like to simplify it in the fact that we can live 2 to 3 weeks without food, 2 to 3 days without water, and 2 to 3 minutes without oxygen. So the most important element of our existence is the element of oxygen. So the more acidic we become, the more oxygen deprived we become, and that's where most dysfunctions thrive, if not all, is in that low oxygen environment. And yet the more alkaline we become, the more oxygen enriched we become, and that's our protection, that's our life insurance policy, because again, alkalosis is just as deadly as acidosis. And yet these minerals, these trace minerals, work on that buffering system. Is that in this case, if the body needs that proper balance, and we have to remember, the most acidic liquid in the human body is in our gut acid. And it has a pH of 1.2 to 3, and nothing neutralizes that. You know, oftentimes I hear these individuals talking about drinking high pH water. Now remember, our mouths love high pH water, and if you think about it, our mouths love oxygen. And yet, if we neutralize that gut acid, we're dying. We're in the process of dying, because when we neutralize that gut acid, we at that point basically stop absorbing our foods, our nutrients, and therefore we start to starve. Now, at the same time, if you think about this, the most alkaline solution in the human body is found in our gallbladders. And yet we remove this tiny little organ in this nation like God put it there by accident. And I don't believe that to be the case. And yet it has a pH of 7.65 to 8.65. Nothing in the human body exceeds 8.65. So in this case, that blood, and talking about that blood, is by far the most critical balance in the human body, because the blood has to maintain a 7.35 to a 7.45. If it changes even 1/100%, we're dead. So in other words, everything that we're trying to do is stop the rotting process from within. And what I believe that these trace minerals are offering to our health is that instead of robbing those cells, tissues, organs, and eventually the bone, which no female wants to hear, is that something is robbing her bone. Well, in this case, that's what I believe that we're capable of doing. By reestablishing that balance of these trace minerals, we can stop the robbing process and help that balancing process within the body. And again, if we're paying close attention, we should be able to. What to me personally, there is nothing that our bodies aren't capable of overcoming if we put the proper tooling in place. And by doing so, it starts with good hydration and that good mineralization. And to me, that is the concrete to our foundation that's crumbling today. We have to go back to foundation. And until we do so, if you look around us, if you ask the question, how many of us today on this phone call or on this webinar is either personally facing a health challenge or a family member or a loved one, that it seems as though our foundations under this house of health that we're designed to protect and to thrive and to be happy are crumbling and robbing us of that balance. So with that being said, I hope that as we implement this knowledge into our health and our supplementation, that we can stop that crumbling process of our foundation and stand again on a sturdy foundation, so when that ill wind of health blows, we can stand firm, tall, and strong. And of course, in this case, once we do that, we can help others around us, because what I love about this concept is it's repeatable with all ages. Paul, do you have any questions on that?
Well, no, I think that it's incredible information, and I so agree with the foundations. And you started earlier by saying every time we step out the door that we're somehow depleting the minerals. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, on how our environment is actually digging our stores of nutrients?
Sure. When you really think about the types of, I guess my point to that, Paul, typically I would have every listener write down the word healed. And then I would have them take that and rip it out of their, off their paper pad or whatever note and crumple it up and throw it away, because the word healed should never exist in our health today. Meaning, and let me explain that, meaning that we are always, from the minute we left our mother's wombs, we have been breathing and dying ever since. So in other words, we're always in a healing process. So what I meant by that is that when we walk out of our front doors today, whether it be the exhaust fumes or these different factories in which we work in or around, these different chemicals that are bombarding our bodies, when we take that into our bodies, it literally takes that, our bodies are going to take those minerals that are supplied, and if we're not supplying them in our food stuff or in our supplementation, they have to be taken from our tissues, our cells, our organs, and eventually our bone to maintain that homeostasis of the blood. So in other words, it's kind of like robbing the bank as we go through our days. Let me paint a picture. Can I do that real quick? I think that if we stop, if we stop for a moment, I'm going to paint the picture of our common consumer today, or our common individual. We are stressed beyond our means today. We cook it, nuke it, eat it out of a can, a box, or a pickup window, or a concession stand. We drink no water because there's just too many options, and most people don't like the taste of water. We're on a handful of medication, and at the same time we wonder why we're falling apart. And to me, that's exactly why our bodies are being robbed like they are, because we're just not supplying those minerals at the levels in which they're needed today, because they just don't exist in our soils today.
Oh no, you're so absolutely right, and the farming practices and the pesticides just totally limit our ability to get what is even there. So the bodies are so deficient in minerals. I think when you talked with Ann previously, you had shared a little bit of a story or testimony yourself, I believe, on how the trace minerals have benefited you and your daughters. Are you willing to share a little bit of that?
Absolutely, I am. My wife had just had our fourth child. He was literally days old when my daughter came down with a condition known as hemolytic uremic syndrome. Basically, it's E. coli, and it shut down her kidneys. At this point, if I would have listened to the advice of our family's practitioner, I wouldn't have a little girl today. So I went to get a second opinion, and before I knew it, I was on my way to the a primary children's hospital. They did some amazing things that, again, I'm grateful for the knowledge in which we can use our bodies as different types of organs to be able to reestablish and give aid to those kidneys. So we were in there for 2 weeks, and at one point the doctor came to me and said, "Your little girl, we believe, is shutting down. Do you mind, would you, and they sat both my wife and I down and asked for permission to do some tests on different body parts." At this point, I became, I have a lot of faith. I knew I had to do something because I had too much knowledge not to try. And yet at the same time, I did something that they were allowing my daughter to consume liquid, and they recommended Sprite, which at that point I did not give my daughter Sprite. I knew I had to spring in. I had to do something. So I started my little girl, and at this point, the urologist basically told us to avoid minerals like the plug, that it would hurt her kidneys in the healing process. Well, I took the information from the trace mineral standpoint. And remember this, if you were to compare that liquid trace mineral product to that of a healthy blood, it is almost identical racial proportion. So I started sneaking the minerals into my 2.5-year-old daughter. Within a day, they came in, and they were doing it on an hourly basis at one point, checking her vitals, her creatinines, her BUNs, of course, her outputs of her kidney function. And I'll never forget when this doctor walked in the following morning, and he had a totally different demeanor. He threw his feet, he sat in a chair and threw his feet up on the end of my daughter's bed, and he wanted to know what I was doing. And at this point, I knew I was viable, so I didn't know what he was talking about. And he says, "Well, what I'm talking about is your daughter's numbers are perfect as compared to the days leading up to this, and all of her body functions are normalized." Well, at this point, we were in there for 2 weeks. When my daughter left the hospital, having consumed more trace minerals than I thought her little body could tolerate. And let me share this. What I think that each one of us should be looking towards as far as our body balance is our own body's ability to tell us that we've had enough, and that's called bowel tolerance. These minerals, once you reach that bowel tolerance, I believe that is the health barometer. That's our healing barometer. And in this case, I pushed my little girl's bowels to more than what I thought her little bowels could tolerate. And in the end, I want you to know this. My little girl now is 17 years old. She was told that she was going to have a kidney transplant before she was 16, that she would be on medication for the rest of her adult life, or not even that, for the rest of her life, because she was only 2.5 when this took place. I want you all to know that my little girl is not on one single medication today. Now, mind you, I am very grateful for what those physicians did to help my daughter recover, but I am extremely grateful for the knowledge in which I was given to be able to help aid my daughter's health back. And today, her numbers are perfect. And like I said, she's not on a single medication. And I have to state that out of the blue, it doesn't happen often, but out of the blue, I get a family that will call me up with the exact same condition in their child at the exact same hospital, And, of course, at that point, I spring into action because I know who gave them that information. And I run down there with my wife calls it a happy basket, all the things that made us happy during those times that we wished we would have had. But based in the bottom of that basket is a bottle of the concentrates, these trace minerals. And to me, the only thing I can state is that's what took my breath away from a healing standpoint, from a father's perspective. And today, I'm again grateful for the knowledge that these products bring to our health.
That's incredible. Anne's here. She wanted to say something.
Well, I just think that's such a powerful, powerful testimony. And for the rest of the audience, I want you to know that I have been working with this doctor because I have two beautiful granddaughters, and both of them have their own serious issues. And, Doctor, you've helped them so much because the little girl with autism, the older one, she's needing to take these because of constipation issues. And as you say, through bowel tolerance, it's really helped her tremendously. But the younger one, she has so many health problems between cerebral palsy and, what's the other one, epilepsy. These trace minerals have helped her in some modification of some of these pretty serious situations. So I can't thank you enough because you've given us, through these trace minerals, we've learned that even though we give our children as much as we possibly can, both of these children have severe gut issues, and these trace minerals have been gradually helping them to improve. The youngest one had such serious reactions to gluten that it was life-threatening, and now that we've been on, along with these trace minerals, we've been on a lot of other products that from Hallelujah Diet, we're finding she can actually have a morsel of gluten without causing some severe issues. So this constant introduction of trace minerals has been extremely valuable for my grandchildren.
You know, Anne, when it happens to one of our own, especially those precious little grandbabies, it makes you stand up, you know, should be giving us each more hope, right? And yet at the same time to know that we have the ability to take control of that internal symphony. Now, I think that it's important that we talk about that concept. You know, I think we've all heard about it. The apple a day that kept the doctor away. I think that's so applicable. I think that that's so applicable to this product, these trace minerals, because the way that you take this product is that you can, of course, me personally, I prefer to dilute it into water. And if you taste it, you've just taken too much. It should be that wonderful Got You product that every mother should have in her armor to be able to protect her children, her grandchildren, her biggest child typically is the male in their life, without them even knowing that it's in there. Because I have to point this out too. I don't think we think about this, but I think it's something to think about. We lose between 2.5 to 3 cups of body fluid just by breathing daily. Just by breathing. Let me repeat that. 2.5 to 3 cups without any exercise, without any type of, exertion, we lose between 2.5 to 3 cups of body fluid. So through respiration, perspiration, urination, and defecation, and of course in women, menstruation, we are constantly outputting these minerals, so they have to be constantly being put back in. And to me, that's the key here, is that we can put them into water, into juice, into smoothies, into protein shakes, into soups, into, I don't care how we get it in, as long as we're getting it in. And to me, we recommend 20 to 40 drops, and we can repeat that once or twice a day. And some would say, well, geez, that's a lot. But remember, our output is so extensive of these. If we're not putting them back in, you can be rest assured that you're going to be battling some type of deficiency, that your body's giving you some wonderful warning indicators that we need to put our fingers on.
And Doctor, one of the things I think is fascinating in this country is we promote very heavily drinking water. And as important as hydration is, and you've made it very clear to us tonight the importance of hydration, one of the things that we have also got a naturopath on our staff, and his name is Olin. And one of the things Olin has made clear is water is wonderful, but it's still merely just water. And so for years, I've listened to him, and I think what's really connected with me is, as important as water is, wouldn't it be even greater for us to be able to not only hydrate, but provide nutrition with every single swallow? So as you're suggesting, instead of just plain water throughout the day, add something to that water to give your body even more nourishment than just hydration.
That is such a wonderful point. And in the fact that we drink more bottled, filtered, distilled RO water than we ever have in mankind's history. And I don't think we've ever been sicker. If you look at a lot of, and yet I oftentimes like to convey it this way. The water is the taxi cab to our system. It makes sure that these nutrients get to every cell within, but if we don't put a passenger into that taxi cab system is useless to us. To me, that is that's the basis of being able to put nutrition back into that hydration and put our health back in order. And when we do, and what I would also recommend is have everybody keep a journal. I love keeping a journal because oftentimes I know those mothers way too well. They take care of everybody throughout the day, but sometimes they forget to take care of themselves. Our single parents, to me, what I love about this product is that most of those single parents can't afford an organic diet. It's basically impossible. But they can't not afford to put these minerals back into their children and themselves on a daily basis. And to me, for pennies on the dollar, we can put that foundational nutrition back in their, in their hands, and they can put it back into their families every single day. So to me, that's the key here, is that these minerals do not replace, and please hear me loud, and these minerals do not replace our other nutrients, but what they do help with is that they help with absorption, activation, and regulation to our other nutrients to help them get proper balance in the body.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part, is they're the cofactor that help to make everything else work better. But they're not the end all, but they are so important.
I love to say to those male listeners, we are all designed to be Lamborghinis, but we treat ourselves like push mowers. We push through the day hoping tomorrow is going to get better, whether that be sleep, whether that be energy, whether that be mental clarity, whatever it is that we're hoping for. But if we keep pushing and nothing changes, you know what they call that today in our society? They call that insanity. To me, that's what these minerals bring back to our engines, is that natural spark that keeps every aspect of our health operable. We are designed to move. We are designed to heal. And more importantly, we are designed to be happy. If we're not happy with our health, we have the choice to make a difference today.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I suppose if somebody was to ask how long they should take trace minerals, your answer would be for the rest of their life?
I usually will answer that something like this. Until you hear the powers that be that are making decisions for this nation, until they start focusing on soil as a part of our health and well-being, how long do we have to be on it?
Yeah.
So in other words, to me, it's just a part of breathing. That's the way I look at this product, is that if we're breathing consistently does anybody stop breathing? I think it's a great thing that it's an involuntary, aspect of our lives, because if we had to think about breathing, we'd probably all be dead today, right? we get so caught up with life and life's worries that I think we fail to stop and focus on the basics. And to me, there's nothing more basic than what we've discussed tonight with our health.
Absolutely. You know, earlier you mentioned the gallbladder. If somebody doesn't have their gallbladder, should they still take trace minerals?
You know what? It's amazing to me what we remove from our bodies today. And we, whether it be, so the answer to that is absolutely. Regardless of what's been removed from us, whether we don't have our appendix or our tonsils, or remember, all these are regulatory organs. I believe that that's why it's so critical if you don't have your gallbladder to be taking these minerals, is to help with that balancing process within.
And do you think there's any connection between a lack or deficiency of trace minerals and hair loss?
I missed that last question.
A connection between a lack or deficiency in trace minerals and hair loss?
Oh, my goodness. What is hair, right? Now, hair, of course, most individuals know when they're going in for their mineral analysis, they take samples of their hair. So to me, the key question there is, once we put that balance back in, I think that, what I typically hear most is my hair color is coming back to its original color, and they're amazed at that. But at the same time, for those individuals, if I could pay very close attention to your own well-being, whatever that issue is that you're trying to correct, pay very close attention. I hope that they'll contact you, Paul and Anna, to answer that question for you in the end of their experiment.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion, I think, sometimes around minerals, ionic, organic, inorganic. Some are in a powder or capsule form. Is there anything specific that people should be looking for when they're considering a trace mineral?
Well, remember this. If you were to take the breakdown of food, first and foremost, let's define that. An organic, organic by definition, from an element standpoint, is an element linked to a carbon molecule. Remember, these elements have never taken a breath. They've never lived, right? So they're inorganic by nature. But at the same time, if you were to break that down, we oftentimes hear, is it plant-based? Well, again, a plant basically takes that element that's available from the soil and through what's called the xylem of the root system, breaks that down into an ionic mineral. So I think that the word ionic is vitally important to understand when it comes from a food. If you want to talk about food-based supplement, these trace minerals that we've been discussing, because of that nature, and remember, the very nature of that ion is the smallest form in which that mineral can be derived and still keep a physical state. So therefore, they don't have to go through an absorption process. So I hope that I answered that question.
Oh, no, it was definitely helpful. And do you think there's a difference between what an adult would consume and a child or an infant?
Oh, no, that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you brought that up. For infants, and, sometimes mothers have a concern with, if they're nursing to begin with and they're taking those minerals, I think that that's adequate for their infants. But at the same time, I like to take an infant's body weight, and for every 5 pounds of body weight, focus on 1 drop of minerals. So if we're dealing with let's say a 15-pound infant, we would focus on 3 drops of minerals.
Is that once a day or multiple times a day?
I love to space it out. Remember, we breathe all day long. We perspire all day long. Oftentimes in adults, we stress all day long. So, most supplement takers take everything at breakfast and they're done for the day. I believe that we need to space these minerals out all day long. So for a little one, I love to do, again, 1 drop at breakfast, 1 drop at lunch, and 1 drop at dinner time. Now, for adolescents, I just like to take the, 5 drops throughout the day. And then, of course, if that little one has any digestive dysfunctions, we're going to push that. So we're going to increase by the same number until their bowels loosen. And then at the time that their bowels loosen, we're going to decrease by the same number. So let me explain that from an adult standpoint. I would recommend to an adult listening tonight that we start with 10 drops at breakfast and 10 drops at lunch. I want to stay away from the evening hour. I don't want to give them too much energy before bed, because we all know how important sleep is, right? So I would recommend 10 drops at breakfast, 10 drops at lunch, and I would repeat that for 5 days just to allow their body to acclimate to that raw balance. So the reason why I say that is that most people, do you realize that 220 million Americans a day do not eat a raw fruit or vegetable within a day? That to me is very terrifying. So in other words, we have to work them let's work these individuals very slow so that they don't have a healing crisis. And yet at the same time, I would repeat, on the 6th day, I would start increasing each day by 10 drops. So on the 6th day, we're at 30 drops, and that's 10 individual drops, 10 drops 3 times throughout the day. And then the 7th day, we're at 40 drops, and that's suggested on the bottle. Now, at that point, they have to make a decision. And the decision I think that needs to be made is how are your bowels functioning? And remember, 80% of your immune system starts in that gut function. So we have to get that gut functioning, because without that gut function, again, we're not doing any good for our body to begin with.
Oh, that's really cool.
So listen to the bowel. That's our barometer. But before you get to that point, keep a journal. Be specific with yourself. Don't share it with anybody, but put on paper what you're trying to correct and work towards that. So what I love to do is that once the bowel loosens, I would stop and reduce by 10 drops. Circle that number. I call that the foundational number for that individual, because every one of us is so unique and so different, although similar by the fact that we are created, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, each time you notice your bowels loosen, I call that healing. We start the reduction process by 10 drops. So each time your bowels loosen, I would start reducing by 10 drops, and each time your bowels loosen, I'd go back and compare notes with your health. Because I love when these consumers call me up and go, Dr. Starkey, are you sure there's no drugs in this product? The sad statement is they assume that anything that comes with good feeling or lack of pain or well-being must be a drug, because that's the way our society is being educated. I tell them right off the bat, as fast as I can state it, that no, there are no drugs in this product. Why do you ask? And when I ask that question, I am absolutely amazed at what these individuals are willing to share with me from their own personal experience. Mm-hmm. Any questions to that, Paul?
Oh, no, you're right on target. And I really loved how you really explained how the bowels are affected by the trace minerals, and we know how important the bowels are for the absorption of nutrients. So it ties in such a correlation between what we see from people's improved health and the mineral content that they're taking. We just have a couple of questions, and I know we're kind of pushing the edge of the time limit, but I really appreciate your time. A couple additional questions is, should this be taken on an empty stomach with, or, is it okay to take probiotics with it? Does it interfere with any other nutritional supplements that we're taking? So, can you provide any guidance around that area?
So remember this, I love the trace minerals because they should have been found in our food in the first place, right? Because if we lived in a perfect world with a nutritious, rich, balanced soil, I hate to say that our relationship wouldn't be there, because it wouldn't. We wouldn't be having this conversation because we'd be eating it daily, not taking it or supplement with it daily, right? So at that point, I would love to encourage that you take it, with a meal, so that, again, it's put in a basis in which our bodies were designed to take it in the first place. So if those individuals that have sensitive, especially with those sensitive digestive systems, I would encourage to take it with the food. Now, at the same time, people always ask the question, is there any contraindications with medication? Again, the doctors are not telling these individuals to stop eating every raw fruit or vegetable or seed, nut, or grain. So in other words, if you separate these minerals away from your medication, you'll be, and typically we go on that basis between 30 to 40 minutes before or after a medication if you're concerned about it. So in other words, it will not, no contraindication with your medication. As far as taking it with other nutrients, I think that is the most important thing that these trace minerals will do, is help make those other nutrients available in the absorption, activation, and regulation of them. So there's nothing that I wouldn't take these trace minerals with that would have any, contraindication with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, I had a lot of questions about what if I have diabetes, and will it help with belly bloat, or I have an abscessed tooth, or high blood pressure, and I know we're not trying to diagnose, prescribe, but, what can people expect when their bodies are functioning properly from having the right materials?
So in this case, just like I mentioned earlier, Paul, if we keep a journal on what we're specifically trying to correct with our personal health, and we start consistently, and I believe the word consistency is the number one word that's going to help achieve that goal, is that by putting these minerals in consistently every single day and paying attention to those overall health issues, I hope that the listeners tonight will actually give you a response back to your, hopefully they'll contact you and let you know what they were capable of that they didn't, because here's one thing that I have to bring up. Right now I hear these individuals state that my doctor said it's just in my head because they can't find it in a blood work or in a scan. Well, to me, I love when those individuals go, I didn't expect, or I didn't, I love giving hope back to the consumer, because there's not, I don't care if you're a day old or 105 years old. These minerals have always been a part of our makeup, will always be a part of our makeup. And when we reestablish that balance, I don't believe there's anything that our bodies aren't capable of playing the type of music we were designed to play. It should take our breath away.
Oh, it does. We've seen so many incredible healings from what the body's been able to do when it's given the raw materials to heal itself. And the body's whole purpose is to maintain our health, and unfortunately, we don't provide the nutrients that it needs to maintain that. But we surely appreciate your time this evening and for all the information and insights that you've given us. Thank you so much, Dr. Stark.
Thank you for the time, and I look forward to the future.
Yes, absolutely. And we thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, this is Paul Malcolm with the Hallelujah Diet. We have some winners this evening for a 3-month supply of the Hallelujah Diet Trace Minerals. One is Angela Brunette, Meredith Hill, and Joel Stacy. Each one of those will be contacted by our customer service. We thank everyone, though, for joining us, and we look forward to another presentation next month. Until then, may the Lord keep you in good health. Good night. Thank you.